introduce you to how you can adopt GitHub Copilot or GitHub and GitHub Copilot properly within your organization and use it properly. Um, I'm Julian Sharp. I'm going to be your instructor today. Just to let you know, everything's being recorded, and we'll just talk about what we're going to try and address today. So, like with any Copilot or any generative AI solution, if you're planning to use it, you need to understand how to use it and address some of the concerns and issues that are around it. And like with anything, when you plan to use something new, you're going to say, what's going to be effect on my productivity? What's going to be effect on my team? And I can see some real challenges with GitHub Copilot in that, yes, you can use it very superficially and get some benefits, but to use it properly and understand how to implement it properly is actually not that straightforward. There's things you need to worry about, things such as security compliance. Maybe what happens to code that's generated? Is that code, where does it come from? What are some of the issues with it? And I'll talk about this now, but essentially GitHub Copilot is trained on publicly available code. So if you generate code, are you copying that code, or is that code good code? Yes, I can go take GitHub Copilot, use it to help write code. I've seen lots of people do this. They vibe code, they generate stuff, but how do they know that code is good? How do they know it follows best practices? How do they know it's secure? So concerns, and you also need to worry about what can I accidentally expose by doing prompts. Can I expose my proprietary information through that? So just going and using GitHub Copilot, yeah, it's great, and I'm going to talk about how it can be used later. But there are some challenges which you may get pushed back on. Yeah, and again, what's the quality of the suggestions, the code it suggests? Does it produce efficient code? Not always. Does it produce correct code? It generates bugs. I mean, I've been quite surprised how good it is in some purposes. I've also seen using different models gives very different results. And there's a danger that your developers will just start accepting that code. You over rely on GitHub Copilot to do things for you without maybe looking for what's going to happen. Do you go check all the code properly? Is it going to leave you open to vulnerabilities? Because some of the patterns it's based on in public code are not necessarily best practice code. They're often what's in public repositories is for I look at some of my public repositories, they're not good examples of how to write code. They're like little demos or other things in my public repos. So if it's trained on those, that's not necessarily the best thing. Also for developers, some people are going to be skeptical. I was, but I think I had to learn to use it properly. I think once I went through how Copilot works and GitHub, that helped me understand why I would use it more. I'm much more going to use it. I thought, well, it's just for somebody else, not for me. And I can see how it does work. So you do need to have guidance for your developers. You need to understand how it's going to be done, how to use it properly. They need to understand its capabilities so they can use it properly. I think that's one of the advantages we get. I've been through the GitHub Copilot course and the certification. That's really helped me understand how to use it. Is it going to fit into my existing workflows? So does it use my existing IDEs, my existing pipelines, my coding? How do I use it with my coding standards? And this sort of comes into what licenses you have. Do you have GitHub licenses? Then there's GitHub Copilot licenses. And to actually get to access some of the really good features, you may need to pay. That's where we get into the cost and ROI justification. You've got to weigh the cost of this versus the gains and the quality of it. Now, one thing I really love, which we'll get into, is metrics. GitHub Copilot actually generates a whole lot of metrics on how we're using it, but you also need to measure yourself. What's the impact of Copilot? Is it going to be worth it? Are we going to see it? So this moment, I was really aimed at people who are looking to use GitHub Copilot in their organization. Either you're currently using it or you're planning to use it. You want to look at how you can improve productivity. or you just maybe curious about what GitHub Copilot can do for you without affecting your productivity. So I think we just put this up. I like to put a little challenge up. Really, we're going to talk about how GitHub's approach and my take on that, about how you might go and adopt Copilot and understand what it is so you can adopt it without slowing down, without affecting your work. It's always a challenge when you're doing any new thing. So just on me, for those of you who don't know me, I do recognize some names here. Welcome. I've been building solutions. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a full-time developer, but I write code. I write code. I call APIs. I build code to extend solutions. Pretty much work building solutions around Power Platform and Azure. But I've used AI in my solutions for a long time, for probably 10 years now. And I've really started adopting Copilot. I write code. I've seen how writing code can help me. I've been training Power Platform AI now and Dynamics before that for 18 years now. So that's for me. Just a little bit about you. So what we've got here, I posted the link in the chat. So you can click in the link in the chat and go there, or you can just go to menti.com and key in that code 787. I've got dyslexia. 57875 and just get a little bit about you. I want to know how much you know about GitHub and GitHub Copilot. So put that up on the screen, links in the chat, or you can scan the QR code there at the bottom of the screen. It'll take you in there directly in and see where you get. So I've got one person in. Come on, more of you. I'm interested to see how many people have used GitHub, because I've been using GitHub for years. Using GitHub for my little work, keeping track. Before that, Visual Source Safe. I always use some sort of source code repository, and I use GitHub. If you can't see I'm sharing my. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Oh, was she? I know what happened. My internet dropped out. Sorry about that. I thought I was sharing my internet dropped out, but just before we started. So yeah, thanks. What's 500 internal error? I'm not sure what that means. So yeah, you should be able to see my screen now. Okay. All right. So let's be getting error. I'm not. So what do you mean? Oh, onto the link. Oh yeah, it is. Yes, Cloudflare is there. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, the link isn't working. It's working for me. Um, Let me go into mine. Let's just go in. Go see if I can go. That's lovely. I love it when things don't work. Yeah, Cloudflare's down. Okay. Listen, that's it. Happened went out last week, didn't it, as well, Cloudflare? This is interesting. Let's see if anything else is working. So yeah, let's see. Yeah. It's just Cloudflare. Okay, we won't be doing that. I had one of you in briefly. Okay, we'll skip past that. Oh, that's a shame. I might put it up at the end just to see if it does come up. Cloudflare, big Cloudflare. Okay. Oh, lovely. Oh, well, we'll move on. And going on with it. So the agenda today is here's the agenda. Yeah. So what is GitHub Copilot? We'll start with what Copilot is. So I just need to mute everybody. That's better. Right. Okay. Looks like an outage. I'm really annoyed by Mentimeter. Yeah. Cloudflare. Unbelievable. Anyway. So we'll talk about what Copilot is. We'll talk about GitHub's engineering playbook, and then we'll talk about my take on that for GitHub Copilot. We'll look at use cases for Copilot. So if you're not using GitHub Copilot, we'll explore how you can use it. And then we'll talk about skilling for it, what resources are available to you. And then we'll get into, I say, metrics, some things I think are really important to understanding adoption. Okay. And then we'll look at certifications that are available. It's got some quite cool certifications. So here we are. looking how we can boost our skills without slowing dev cycles. So first of all, what is GitHub Copilot? So really the best way to think of GitHub Copilot is an AI assistant. So if you do pair programming, it's somebody giving you hints and helping you along. It is key thing about GitHub Copilot. It's there by your side, helping you build code, test code, explain code. It's helping you create better code. It enhances your coding productivity by providing AI assistant. So think of it as an AI assistant that's ever present to help you. It actually goes further than that because it can do things on your behalf when it runs in agent mode. But I've only got an hour or 15 minutes now to talk about that. So I really can't go into too deep. So think about, yes, an AI assistant. So most people think about GitHub Copilot as something that generates code for you. You can ask it to go generate code. It can generate code from a comment. Or your existing code suggests what you should write next. You can ask it to go and create whole new functions for you in your code. So you can use it as a coding assistant to help you. Think of it in better IntelliSense. You can start predicting what code you need next. You can look at comments. You can look at the other code in your project. See what do I need. We've also got GitHub Copilot Chat, so we can ask questions about our code. We can ask it to explain our code or understand what we're trying to do. And I'm going to give you some use cases for that later on. We can help it to write test plans, generate documentation. So it helps us do some of the drudgery tasks that take us a while. And it's actually very good at understanding what your code does and helps you understand that. We'll talk about some use cases where that can be useful. So it's based on a codex language model, and you can actually switch which language models to use that, again, depending on license. There's a free version, different paid for versions, but the more you pay, the more flexibility you have which language models you use, whether using GPT codex, or you could use something like, what's the latest one? Claude, or something else like that to help you, and you get different results. So it uses a trained model. And if we go, and actually one of the key things that I think is important if you're adopting Kubernetes is to actually understand how GitHub Copilot calls the language model. How does it generate the prompt? What context does it use? And this is something that's not well understood. And is one of the things, if you go through the course, which I thought, oh, this makes a huge difference to my results. I was just using GitHub Copilot simply. I think I'll just use it to do this. But once I really understood how the language, how the context is being passed, not just from what I'm doing on my work, but what I've got in my organization set up, I could actually start generating much, much better code from the language model. But you need to understand how it works. And I think that's one of the things that's really, really important. And if you do the actual exam, it's one of the things they test you on. How does the prompt work? Where does it get all this background and knowledge and resource augmented generation, RAG stuff from, and understand how it pulls that together, both from your computer, from your repos, and from your organization. It is integrated to different IDEs. I'm going to show you Visual Studio Code, but it also works with JetBeans and JetBrains, Visual Studio, NeoVim, and other IDEs. But it works best with Visual Studio Code. And it's available on different platforms. Now, what Microsoft did about early last year or early this year, they made it free. There's a free version of GitHub Copilot. You just have to have a GitHub login to use it, sign in, and you get access to the free version. The free version actually gives you a fair amount of stuff. I've got GitHub Copilot Pro license, which gives me a bit more. And then there's also, if you're an enterprise license, so there's GitHub licenses and GitHub Copilot licenses. You need both. And the other thing it does, it can actually learn from you. How do you write code? What's not just you, but your organization. If you've got an GitHub organization account, it could pick up and learn how you write your code for your organization and for you, and then suggest things so you don't get code that's alien to you, it looks the way you write it. And we'll adopt to that over time. So what do I need? I need a GitHub account. Now, GitHub accounts are free, but again, you can have paid for licenses. whether you can have this pro licenses, team licenses, business licenses, organization licenses. So you need a GitHub account. And then there's GitHub Copilot license. Again, I'll say there's free, and then there's Pro, Pro Plus, and then you got business and enterprise. To be honest, there's not that much difference in the price. I suppose there is. I suppose it goes from $10 to $39 a month. But you to actually make the best use of it, you need probably a paid for GitHub account and a paid for GitHub license, and you need something supported ID. Now we've also got GitHub Copilot CLI, and I've seen a lot of people now just using the command line for it, but I tend to use it inside Visual Studio Code. It's just more natural. I'm not a full-time developer, but if you can use the CLI to do it. So when I say what does GitHub Copilot do, it's really focused on code. Understand that it's not very good at asking respond to general things, unrelated to coding or generative, or just technology in general. Anything's unrelated about business. It really does understand. It's good for writing code. It helps you fix bugs. It'll identify bugs. It helps you add comments, and we're going to talk about explaining code later. But key thing is, it's a tool at your service. It doesn't replace you. It doesn't replace your expertise and skills. You're still in charge of everything it does. You have to accept its suggestions. You don't have to accept what it generates. I think this is some of the danger that we talked about earlier, that people just go, oh, I'm going to just use this. So remember, Copilot is an AI coding assistant that helps you write code faster, helps focus your energy and skills on solving problems. Okay. But it's really important. You should know when you should and shouldn't use it. You shouldn't use it just for everything. And I've seen too many people just go straight off and do it. So we're going to just some terminology here. We mentioned that Copilot can help generate code. That's what we call code completions. It generates completions, which are, what it does, it generates suggestions for code, and you can accept those suggestions. And that's your code that it adds in. I mentioned chat. We've got a chat pane, so we can ask questions about our code. We've got inline chat, so I can just highlight a bit of code, and in that code, ask it what that line does. We've got a coding agent. This is where it starts interesting, where it can take actions on your behalf, like go through and make a load of changes in your project, like renaming a variable, does all that for you, or maybe change how you do things across a code base. I mentioned the command line. It can also help us do things like create a GitHub pull request, or to summarize our pull request for me. So rather than me writing what the text does or what all the code it generates that for me. That used to be an enterprise feature. I think it's now moved into free, which is quite good. And Copilot Edits, again, is a tool to allow me to do multiple edits across my code base. It's rather than me doing one thing at a time. So let's move on now to GitHub's 3-step framework. So what there is, GitHub actually has a whole load of documentation. Actually, GitHub documentation is good. I'm going to give you points to the documentation later. But what it does is it has this idea. It has a thing called the GitHub Engineering System Success Playbook. They call it ESSP. That's how I do it. And here's a link to it. I'm going to explain. I'm not going to go through this because this is quite a big wordy document. Let's have a quick look at it. I've got it ready here. So here it is. I'll give you all these links at the end. So here's my GitHub resources. It talks about what it is, and you see I've nicked that diagram. It's this 3-step program. I'll explain what it is and my take on it for GitHub Copilot. So this isn't just for GitHub Copilot, it's for GitHub as well. So what do you want to do? And basically what it tries to understand is, let's create a 3-stage process where we identify what are the issues, the barriers to stop us. What's our current situation? Step 2, this isn't rocket science. Step 2, evaluate what you need to do. And step 3 is implement and monitor. And the key thing here is monitor and then adjust. It's not a one-time thing. It's an iterative process. So identify, evaluate, and implement. And they talk about having different zones for different things and measuring in different ways. So it is quite a long thing. If you were to go and look at this whole thing, doing a playbook, it's a big PDF. I'm just going to it now. It's huge. How many pages is it? It's just a lot of text on here. So it's a good thing to start with. I'm just going to break it down for you, maybe for how I might approach it for GitHub Copilot. So let's talk about how I might do it. So I've just slightly renamed them, understand and enable. For me, for GitHub Copilot. So this is, for me, my take on how I do this for GitHub Copilot. So I understand GitHub's Copilot's capabilities, what it can and can't do. I've sort of talked about them a little bit already, but it's also understand its strengths. Its strengths are generating standard code, boilerplate code, for instance, generating code as I'm typing, helping me generate tests and documentation, explaining what my code is, but also its limitations. Understand where it's getting its completions from. What's it actually using for that? Understanding that maybe that code isn't optimal. It doesn't necessarily follow best, most modern practices because it's trained on lots of public code, and lots of public code isn't necessarily the best. So understand what limitations are. Understand which set up some use cases where you might want to use it in your organization. I'm going to talk about some of those later. How could I use this? And I think there's some really good places to start with GitHub Copilot. They need to set up all your prerequisites. So have you got the relevant subscriptions and licenses for GitHub and GitHub Copilot? Have you assigned them? If you are a large organization, how am I going to set up my GitHub Enterprise accounts? So how am I going to set up organizations and teams? How have I got my repos set up? And there's actually quite a lot of configuration options that can affect how GitHub Copilot works, whether the organization, the enterprise organization repo, and even on your own computer. You need to understand what those options do. That's pretty good out of the box, but there are some really good things that it does, especially Copilot, where if you set it up, so we can have custom instructions and things like that, but they're quite well hidden unless you know where they are. And they can make a huge difference on how it trains or how it works. Like for instance, yeah, you can enable and disable certain features. We can turn on telemetry option, which I highly recommend to make sure you're monitoring well. And then again, yeah, set up everything else. Language prioritizing where you're going to use it. The screen is being shared, Michael. If you're not seeing anything, I'd go out and go back in again. I think everybody else should be able to see the screen is being shared. Wasn't earlier. I forgot it dropped out. So step one is really just get ready. And I wouldn't underestimate what's involved with that. And again, that's really about learning what the product can do to do it. And really the way you're going to do this and get it well is to run a pilot. Really start small with a subset of developers or teams to test the impact and how Copilot works. Define clear use cases. Where do you want? Because there's a lot of capability in GitHub Copilot, and it's very easy to get, I can use all of these things. I think start with maybe using it for some things, then adding other things. Like don't necessarily, maybe start with inline code completions, then maybe talk about boilerplate code. Then maybe go on to things like writing tests and documentation. Then maybe look at refactoring. There's different, you define what use case you're going to use, especially initially. Don't try and do everything straight on. And really then iterate, customize and iterate, decide what you're going to use and add more to it. So add features such as code explanation and test generation rather than just go for everything straight on. And then come up with things like prompt libraries. Again, with any generative AI, it's about how do you write prompts. And you can create a prompt library, create some custom instructions, which I mentioned, so everybody's using it to generate prompts that are or completions and suggestions that are good for you. Okay, so you need to learn to refine that, capture feedback and refine. And then establish clear guidelines for everybody to understand how to use Copilot. I don't think anything is particularly difficult. We'll talk about metrics. We're going to come back to metrics at the end. You want to track the productivity metrics. Now, some of those you can do in, say, GitHub. Look at how many guides of code. I don't know, lines of code is a good measure, but you see how many things are doing. You can actually, GitHub Copilot, we have some metrics on usage and adoption. So we can see how many people are using it, how often it's being used. And you can then maybe start looking at other metrics on code quality. You want to gather feedback. So maybe like things like, okay, how quick other metrics, how things have bugs, how quickly are bugs fixed, for instance, or identified. Gather feedback. How satisfied the developers? Bring everybody together and discuss how you can refine the use of Copilot, and then create some good policies to help you go forward as you roll out and scale out worldwide. But it doesn't stop there. It is an iterative process as you roll out and measure it. So I think just these are my 4 key concepts. This comes from the ESSP. Where as you go through the process, these are things you should keep in mind. You should always bring in your people, your developers' perspective. We need to work collaboratively on this. You got to be careful on the metrics because metrics affect behavior. People see metrics or number of pull requests issued. You're going to get a lot more pull requests. That may not be the best thing. So don't get people gaming the system. It says balance the cost of measurement with benefits of measurement. Yeah, it's like anything. I once spent 6 months building a whole this really before we had proper DevOps, Azure DevOps process. I once spent 6 months in my team building our own DevOps. Essentially, we wrote in PowerShell scripts to manage everything and create metrics. The cost of that was because we're just so busy, fed up doing things manually. We tried to automate it like every developer does. We spent a lot of time building that. So he's not. There's always a balance in understanding how much the metrics are telling, how much versus metrics there. I'll talk about that, Nicholas. I'll come and answer that in a minute. Okay, that's a good question. Um, yeah, and then just focus on incremental improvements rather than big bang. So I think I might get into one of your questions later, Nicholas. Nikolai, so let's have a look about practical use cases of GitHub Copilot. And I think that comes down to, I talked about how does the prompt really work. We cover it in the GitHub Copilot course, understand how we protect data. There's some settings. I might go have a look at that in my GitHub repo to say what we do. So understanding what it's looking at is important. So some use cases for code completion. So I can go in, and as I start writing code, I can get it to generate code snippets for me. What it does, it generates suggestions, and I can do that either inline or with something else. So I can start going into code and getting it to prompt me. So basically, the moment you stop typing or you press Control and I, or it depends if you're on Mac or Windows, it will prompt and add suggestions for writing code as you write in them. And that's how probably most people experience GitHub Copilot is that first, okay, typing away at doing this, ask it to generate a function to do me something. It's really good at generating repetitive code, so the sort of code you type every time, boilerplate code. And doing things like generating tests. And then we've also got GitHub Copilot Chat, where you get a Copilot Chat. So if I just go into here, I'm in a tiny little Visual Studio Code project. This is a PCF control, which is a Power Platform control written in TypeScript and CSS and HTML. And I can just go into my code. Just a little thing to do is here's my code. And I can maybe start typing some code. So maybe I don't know, I'm not going to do it. So let's go look at this. I don't know what I should do something. Maybe I just start typing some code and I go, and and it's automatically started prompting for stuff. And I just hit tab and it'll do it. It's actually got to put something in I didn't want to. Okay, so it's all that's GitHub Copilot coming in. So I've got inline prompts where I can press Control I and I can ask questions in context about my code. Or I can go into here. Now, in my GitHub Copilot chat here, what it's doing is, I'll try and answer your question here. So when I do anything in in GitHub Copilot, it looks at what you've got open. So if I ask it a question about code, it's gonna, the context now is just this file. So I say, so if I do one of my prompts, um, so if I ask a question, it's going to look at my code and then go and understand what it's there. So it's used in one reference. So I've just asked it a question. I'm using chat and it's showing me how this particular thing called on notify output change triggers used. It's used to interact between my control and the form it's on. So it's explained it's got after public resources there, but it's used the context of my code. If I didn't have that open, it won't look at that. What it says is taken my code. Okay. If I have another window open, so let's just open something else as well. So the CSS, I've got maybe open that as well. Open to side. I've got more files open. It's going to look across all of those. So it looks at your open, we're talking about the context of what it's looking at. It looks at this, but I can also tell it to do other things. I can do this. We've got methods such as telling it where to look. So I can use something like at workspace, which says look about what's on my code. I don't need them open. I can ask workspace. What is my CSS doing? And it's going to look, and you notice it says use 5 references, and it's referenced the files I've got open. It's actually, and also where else I've got. So understanding what it's using, that. So just to say, ask you a question, because that's a really good question, Nikolai. No data is used in training. No, it's not. It only trades off public resources, public repositories. So if you don't want your stuff being used for training, don't have it in a public repo. But if I've got my GitHub organization, so I'm in my, why am I not signed in? Oh, that's going to be annoying because I thought I was signed into GitHub. I've got to do my phone. I'm going to sign this out. Let me sign in. So I'm in my GitHub organization. I've got an organization here. Let's go into my organization. I've got I've got settings in here that I can say what I can do. Now I haven't got a Gib enterprise license. So I haven't got actually everything. So let's go into my one here. I haven't got a plan, but in here I've got some settings. Settings gone. Settings got hit repository. They used to have a thing called what's it called? Because it expired. They just changed all this now. We used to have the ability to tell it to search across our own repos. So what you can do is you can, in the configuration, tell it that I want to search across all the repositories or a select subset of repositories within my organization. So I've got a whole series of repositories under here. I can say in my Copilot options where it can access. I've got to enable it on my organization. I haven't got it enabled on this org. And I can say, okay, which repository of this organization can it search across? So we can, but that's a really good way of getting standardized code because it'll look at using our repositories. So if you've got control, Nicola, I think that's what I'm trying to say in here. I can tell it just to look at my code in my Visual Studio Code. I've got my context in VS Code, but I can also, if I'm logged in, I'm part of an organization, I can tend to look across other repos. And we can specify, we can select which repositories it searches on. They just changed it. I can't remember what it's called. Was it? No, not Notebooks. There was something before. They've actually got, it's actually all changed now. They've moved to a different model now for doing this literally last month. And I haven't played around with it on that. So since it's swapped over. But yeah, we're going to say what repository we have. We can say, okay, where it can go. We've got loads of other rules on Copilot, so we can go into it. Let me just go back into my repository. So if I go into one of my repositories, I don't know. No, probably one of my own ones, which I'm forked. Okay, now I'm not going to go into one of those. But I can go, that's just so simple. Hello World one, I can go in and do settings on here. So again, I've got repository settings. There's repository settings. Again, I've got Copilot options in here, which says, okay, what can I do? What can I do with this? Can I have Copilot enabled on this? Can it be used on this repo? I can set up different rules. So this is one of the things I want to point out. You need to go and understand how it all works to enable it and use it properly. Just in terms of other, so yes, we've got control. We can restrict what we do. We can also, we've got other options in here. So what my chat instructions are, settings, there's lots of options even within Visual Studio Code. So what's enabled, what's disabled. We can configure those again as an enterprise. I can configure and control what everybody can do in that. So just trying to help you understand what's there. Generally about API keys, that is normally a GitHub responsibility. So if I try and publish, and I've done this, if I try to publish any code, or actually if you have a key or password in your code, it will flag it up. It will actually prompt you for that. And you can set up rules for that. But that's more of a GitHub thing than GitHub Copilot, although GitHub Copilot does hook into security. This is where I think with GitHub Enterprise or GitHub Organization licenses, it actually includes that scanning and prompt for you. It ties in with the GitHub Advanced Security tools. So Copilot, but again, I think you need the extra license for that. And again, we cover that in the course about what you can do. That's a very important part of understanding security. So yeah, preventing leakage is all part of it, but that's more of a GitHub. I think you get basic stuff with GitHub Copilot, but if you've got the extra GitHub licenses, then it hooks into it and you actually prompts as you go forward. But anyway, you've got things like if you publish to a public repository, it'll flag that up anyway because GitHub's got scanning for that. Yeah. So other things that are quite good, you could I've mentioned use cases, generating code, generating tests, answering questions about your code in natural language, creating boilerplate code. So I want to create a standard way of doing it. And you can also complete tasks themselves. You say, as a tester, do this. As an architect, do this. You can say this and get slightly different results out. And there's also some special, this hash. I've used the @ symbol there to say workspace. We can do things like do hash to refer. I want to refer just to a piece of code, or I'll do / commands to do other things like, okay, do setup, these are commands that I can do. We'll look at a couple of these as we go through. Other use case, I think this is where gets more interesting for me. How can I read? I mean, yes, using writing code. Here I'm talking about maybe some slightly bigger use cases. Say I want to learn something new, a new language or framework. You can help me with that because I could say, explain this to me. I want to do this in C#. So I've got existing code. Explain how I do this in Python. And it'll generate the code in Python. So I can see my existing code versus that new language to do that. We can also use it to translate. So I can say here, I've got some code in TypeScript. I can just say convert it to JavaScript. And it's going to go off and turn that TypeScript. It's not TypeScript. TypeScript is just transpiled into JavaScript, but I can write PCF controls in JavaScript if I wanted to. So it's generated the equivalent JavaScript for me. Okay, if I do that, or say convert to say Python, would that work? I'm not sure. We'll try. I've not tried this one before, but say what would this look like in Python? It probably is not going to work very well. Yeah, it's actually told me I can't use it and told me why. But yeah, so really good doing translation. Help me context switching. That really means do things without moving out from what I'm doing. I can just work within my flow. I don't have to switch to another tool. I can work within my work stream. I can focus. I think one of the biggest challenges to develop is context switching. We have to go in and out of the same code, and you have to brain else to switch over. It can help with debugging. It can prompt. It shows you potential errors. We can write tests. So I can go do this sort of thing. I go, let's go generate some tests for me. Maybe let's do this, suggest tests for edge cases. So it's going to generate some test code for me. So generate some unit test codes so I can go build, and you can build whole test plans as well. I can use the slash create test. Slash create is a slash create setup test. So I want to set test, create tests on there. I can also use documentation. So this one's quite cool. Actually, it's just got a new chat. Clear it off. Right, documentation. And I've used the app workspace again. So right document, I've got the thing open. It's going to generate a whole load of code for me. Generate some text. And how it's worked. That's slightly different from last time I asked. Interesting. So it's just a structure. It's giving me some structure for that. And I'm going to talk about some more examples here. So modernizing legacy applications and code refactoring. I'm going to talk about a little bit more. I've used it to generate sample data. I'm really bad at generating sample data. If you ever go on one of my training courses, I'm always using like band names or my cat names, just so I can't think of data. Generating sample data is really good for testing. But let's look at a couple of, I think, quite interesting use cases. So modernizing legacy applications. What we do is we're going to use different features of GitHub Copilot to help us. So understand the code. So I can ask it to go, okay, explain what this code does. So I've used the hash explain. And again, I can workspace explain how the code. And the PCF is quite an interesting one because you have to understand how it works, how the different methods work. So you can understand. So I picked up, and it's not unnecessarily used just in legacy. Anybody's code I've picked up, I can go and say, well, how's this working? I'll let it run away. It's going to think about that. Then maybe I want to translate it to a new language. I can say that, convert the code into a new language, convert it to Python. We can look at them refactoring it. It's just going to be a prompt. It's done that. So it's explained. So it's actually come back and explained the code for me, how it works. This is just a very simple control that counts the number of characters on a field. Because I use it for demo, it's not that much code, but it understands what it does, how it's working. You normally have to do this yourself a lot. Then maybe you refactor it to follow best practices. Generate the documentation and generate tests. So I'm using different features to maybe do this. Now, I could have done this before myself, but it'd take me a long time. I can refactor, modernize some code quite easily and quickly, taking me hours rather than days. There's a link on here which will talk you through it. Another one, code refactoring. So code refactoring is about just changing what a function does without changing how it behaves. So again, what we might do, if you ask it to suggest improvements, can I suggest improvements readability? So let's just try this one on here. So I'll just go to my code and say suggest improvements for readability. I just ask it to do this, add comments, naming, and it's actually generated some code for me. And say actually how I might change that and add some comments in for me. So suggest readability, so make it more concise, clean up my code. So I could say clean, this code I think I've actually clean up. I can do this to help me understand, yeah. So clean up version with improved readability, consistent formatting, and minor optimizations. I can't really see much difference in that, to be honest. Well, a little bit, yeah. So yeah, we can use it. Code refactor is a really good use case for it. So that's just one more before we move on. Is about, okay, how we're going to use it across the lifecycle. So we can use it to generate boilerplate code. I'm writing code, suggest design patterns for me. So as I'm building code, I can say, okay, I want to build a new framework or sort of new function, generate the code for that. And then once I built my code, look for how to make my code better, readability, translation, example there, refactoring again. In fact, that link's wrong. I'll update that link. It should be for the SDLC link. Then generating testing. and then looking fixes and suggesting improvements. We can use it right the way across. It's not just an initial building of code. So there's some use cases. Let's talk about how do we get skilled up. And really, I think these follow the ESSP idea. You look at what you've got already. What skills do you have? And I think it's really important to understand the gaps which people have in writing prompts, for instance. You'll need to train people how to write better prompts for doing this. I'm just doing some very simple things. You need to find out what works for you in your code base and what sort of work that you're doing, the language you're using. Set objectives. What do I want to focus on? Is it code? Oh, generate more code? Is it creating better quality code? Are we trying to make people follow standard patterns? You need to understand what your goal is for using Copilot. What do I want my developers to do with it, rather than just write more code? Because that's when you start using it, you'll end up maybe with different people using it different ways, and it becomes more of a problem. Define again, map roles to these. What are each developer going to use? So I need to think again about security, quality assurance in here, how that works. So who's going to use Copilot in different ways? Because say QA can use it to write tests or run tests. You can actually do run tests for you as well. I didn't mention that. And then we decide how we're learning. How are we going to train people? You need to introduce the Copilot basics, some of the stuff I've talked about. What do you use and when do you use it for? How do we configure all the settings? So you need to understand all of those properties and the effect that some of those have. We need to do some practice, like get people to try things out. Now, Microsoft GitHub has some Copilot labs, which we can go and look at, and you can try things out. I'm going to give you a link to those later on for experimentation. We go to GitHub and try GitHub Copilot out. And then maybe do some more advanced training on things like how do I integrate Copilot with your pipelines? How do I use that? Because it can, the impact of that. And then, as I say, key thing, measure with your metrics. Track adoption, track some other metrics you want to do, but don't go too far. And then refine and iterate to make it use it better. And then scale out to the rest of your organization. So it's really just the SSP in a slightly different way. So let's have a look at some of these metrics now that I mentioned. And there's quite a large number of metrics that we have. We have engagement and adoption. So you can look at the number of people actually using Copilot over a period like today, 7 days, 28 days back. You can look at license utilization. You give a license out, how many people are actually using it? So it's like licenses. And where are they using it? Are they using it in the IDE? Are they using chat? Are they using the CLI? So we have that. We can see the total number of suggestions being generated and actually how many being accepted. There's no point generating suggestions if people aren't using them. So the prompt is accepting that code. So it traps those, that number of accepted acceptance rate figures. So we get that. We got chat. How many people are using chats? What type of chats are used? How many people are actually using chat? And we have a Copilot dashboard as well. There's advanced insight, breakdown by language, breakdown by adoption, usage trends. There's a lot in there. So we've got these usage metrics here. They're all documented on what it does, data available and things like that. So all the different metrics have been calculated behind the scenes so that we can go and use. And then there's also a dashboard. You can go into GitHub for this. So where's my dashboard gone? I probably was in it, and I'm gonna have to open it because I closed it. Let's go to the dashboard. Oh, so annoying. Sorry, the link didn't work. Yeah, dashboard here. That does that. So there's a dashboard that gets generated. You can go see nice little stats and monitor what's going on, and you can filter and look at it. So yeah, you have to install it, and deploy it, but it's there built for you on that, and it's all using application insights underneath. If you know what those are. So learn to help on that for you. I'm conscious of time. So let's talk about resource and certifications that we have for GitHub. Now, until recently, all the GitHub courses and certifications were all handled by GitHub. They've now moved over into Microsoft. So these certifications are all available on Microsoft Learn, and you can go and do those. So they're all available. They've now got the learning content in Microsoft Learn. So they're just we deploy. So you can learn in the same way as you do for all your other Microsoft technologies now. And there's 5 courses and certifications. There's GitHub Foundations. Now this isn't fundamental. So some of you might have done an AI fundamentals, an Azure fundamentals, Dynamics fundamentals, which are really about high-level features and capabilities. The GitHub Foundations is actually quite hard. It covers core GitHub concepts. It's actually GitHub, not GitHub Copilot. It's the whole GitHub concept. How do I use Git? How do I use GitHub? How do I collaborate? How do I use repositories? How do I pull requests? But it actually goes into licensing and GitHub, and they're very much focused on people using organizations. It's actually pretty tough, I think. I actually took this relatively recently, so I have this. Actually, it's credentials. I took and passed this last week. I take exams for fun. But yeah, so yeah, I took the GitHub Foundations and passed that about a week ago. So it's quite a broad exam. I think it's quite tough. It's actually a 2-day course because it's very broad when you look at it. Then there's GitHub administration, which is about administering GitHub environments, managing repositories, governance, doing automate a workflow. Really, it's more for people who organize and administer repos for an organization. Or maybe system administrators. That's the rest of these are all 1-day courses. I took this out when it came out in beta. A lot of it covers it. It goes into security and like what Nikolai mentioned about understanding what like because we've got automatic code scanning going on with CodeQL and studying how that works. GitHub Actions is about automation of workflows. How do I automate my CI/CD pipelines using DevOps practices with GitHub Actions? I know I've historically used Azure. Well, go back Azure DevOps. I've started using GitHub Actions now more. They're different. It's just different ways of doing your automation pipeline. It can be used in certain circumstances. And then there's GitHub Copilot, the one we've really been talking about today, where we go into understanding the use of Copilot, use it responsibly, and how it actually really works. For me, the middle section, which is about understanding how prompts work and how it generates suggestions, how it pulls that together. And then also we've got like, how do I make sure I can tell it not to use public code in suggestions. I can tell it just to look at my own code. There's some really important settings in there. Also, it's off by default. We can tell it not to generate code that looks like anybody else's IP, so it can protect IP. There's again settings there that we need to understand how they work. It looks at any code that's more than 150 characters long and says that looks like somebody else's IP, and suggesting you may want to rewrite it. So it protects you from accidentally breaching somebody's IP. And then there's a gap. There's no 400. There's a 500, which is advanced security, which is really, this is what I'm not going to do because I'm not really a security person. But it talks about vulnerability. So again, Nikolai just mentioned vulnerability scanning, secret scanning, code QR. We've got some basic built in, but how can I actually use it more? Build up the rules for that. It's really more for people who are focusing on the security side. So best practices around managed security. So these are all 1-day courses. I've done Foundations, Administration, and Copilot. I'm going to be doing Actions next. Hopefully do that before Christmas or maybe just after Christmas. I haven't booked it in yet, but that's my next one. But I don't think I'll do the security. That's because it really does focus on those areas. So what do we have? As I say, we've now got in the Microsoft GitHub is now all the courses now within the Microsoft Learn area. So we've got 2 learning paths for GitHub Copilot. I've got the links there. 2 learning paths. Don't cover everything in the exam, but they are pretty good. And they also draw into the GitHub Labs. You see down there's a link to the GitHub Labs, github.com/skills, where you can go into the Copilot Labs and try things out. The docs aren't in Microsoft Learn. It's got its own docs pages, which are actually quite good. Actually, if you are taking the exams, you're used to taking Microsoft exams where you get learned in them. You don't get documentation in these exams. However, just a little hint, all the questions are single and multiple choice. It's quite quick. I think I've got a little blog on when I took the exam. So this is my blog link where I actually wrote about what the exam is. So put that in here. So it talks about they use domains for the different areas, what it covers. What do you get? 65 questions in 100 minutes, just simple choice. So just talked about that. The practice assessment is reasonably good. A little easier. And I also give a link to all the other resources as well. Study guide and some other posts as well, which I found that other people wrote about the exam. So I'll put that on there for you. I'm going to give you links to all of that now. So, got a few minutes left. So if you do have any questions. So key takeaways for me, there is a framework. You can just go start using GitHub Copilot, and I did. I was just as guilty as anybody. I didn't understand what it could do. I didn't do any settings. I just dived in and I found it reasonably useful. I think once I went through the learning content and prepared for the exam, I suddenly realized how much more capable, how many more options is there. I mean, some of the options like using at workspace, the hash command, the slash command, I didn't know they were there. I didn't know how to use them as well. I didn't understand that actually, if I want to get better results, I want to open extra tabs because it looks at the context of my open tabs. So I want to focus on, I've got a big project that can be quite useful. Just open a few more tabs, ask the question, I get better response because it's looking what's there. So yeah, just understand how it works and understand that you need to go through a process to adopt it properly within your organization. We've got the metric. I didn't know there's metrics were there, which I mean, it depends how much if you've got a big set of developers, how are they using it, how we can monitor it, are we getting a good return on investment? But I've talked about different ways of using use cases. For me, some of the more interesting ones where I picked up somebody else's code. I need to make some changes to it. I can use the #/ to /explain to help me do it. I can help build tests. I can help analyze the code for vulnerabilities. I talk about edge cases for testing. I'm quite famous on my projects. If I have developers, I can pretty much break anybody's code quite easily just by doing two things. I always test, which everybody tests what I call the happy path, or things that work. I'm quite good at testing all the things that the unexpected data. That's how I normally do it. That's where edge case testing comes in. And then we cover some of the skilling resources for GitHub and the certification, the different exams. I will say just on that, the GitHub 900 is harder than any of the other fundamentals. They call it foundation, so it's not fundamentals, but people see because it's got the 900 number, they think it's like all the other fundamentals. But most of the other Microsoft fundamentals are high level. The GitHub foundations is actually quite broad and actually quite deep in certain places. You actually need a bit hands-on. You can't just say some of the others do some reading, go on a one-day course and learn it. Or listen to a webinar and pass the exam. That's not possible with GitHub 900. It's tough. I actually think it's tougher than the GitHub Copilot exam because the GitHub Copilot exam is once you go on the training, you understand how it works. Yeah, you can work out the answers. You understand the concepts. The GitHub admin, again, mostly it's just common sense. When you look at it, yeah, you're not going to do this. Yeah, there's some things you need to know, but a lot of it's common sense. But the GitHub Foundation, I found, whoa, that's okay. You need to understand GitHub projects, GitHub pull repositories, GitHub how do GISs work, how do wikis work, who can write to them, and there's little subtle things on that. So thank you for that. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, you can go in the chat and ask anything. Barry's just put in the chat for some feedback. If you could do this, that would be great. I'm going to put a link to the slides in the chat. So I'll do two links. So they're both to my OneDrive. One's to my OneDrive business. So try that one, see if you can get that one. If not, if that one doesn't work, I know some people can't get that. So I'm going to put it into my OneDrive that way. So both of these should work. If they don't, let me know. and I can fix them. So the first one probably should work, but probably get it's a Microsoft. It's my OneDrive for Business link. The second link will probably it's my OneDrive personal, which normally just works. If you don't get that, you've got to copy the slides. It's got all the links in them, and so if there are any questions, I would really recommend getting to learn GitHub Copilot. It's really made a huge difference for me going through the learning for me. So if you don't have any questions, just to remind you about Readynez Unlimited Training, gives you access to the training courses. We do have the various GitHub Copilot courses or GitHub courses all scheduled for next year. I know I'm scheduled on and off to do some of those on that. I say most of them are 1 day. GitHub Foundations is 2 days, but we're considering doing it as a 1 day exam prep, but I'm not sure it's going to be possible. Get your unlimited training on there. So thank you very much for joining today. If you've got no questions, thank you. And I'll see you again next time. Toby is still there. Toby's gone.